Good to see you.
Introducing Ben Harris, CEO at Watchtower. How are you, mate?
Good, thank you. I think enjoying the Vegas heat, as always, despite being irreversibly pale. How about you?
Yeah, all good, mate. Yeah, the conference is going well so far. A couple of days in, so still alive, but we've still got another night to get through. But all well. What about your flights? I know you live in Singapore.
Correct. I think flights were relentlessly boring, to be very honest, as they always are. But uneventful, I think. Got here without too many scrapes and bruises, so yeah, good.
And you got here on Saturday, which is
correct.
Crazier.
the logic being that I would somehow get over the jet lag. Of course, that didn't work at all. That completely failed.
Yeah.
But I did try, and that's what matters, really. So.
Love it. And you said it's been a good trip so far.
Good trip so far. Good to meet some clients out here, some partners, and just catch up with friends. So they've been very, very strong.
Yeah, love it. Well, before we talk about Watchtower, what I like to do with all my guests is just learn a little bit about who you are and how you got into the industry. But before I do that, I was on the flight to Vegas on Monday, and I met someone that you used to work with, which was pretty cool. And I said, can you tell me a fun fact about Ben? And they said, I don't have a fun fact, but they said he's super, super talented. And they actually called you a bit of a child prodigy because you was so young when you worked at MWR and was so impressive. Because I think you was like the youngest person certified in Crest. I won't say who it was, but they spoke very, very highly of you, which was nice. Anyway, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about who you are, Ben, and how you got into the industry.
Yeah, sure. As I always kind of explain to people, cyber for me has never really been a profession. It's never really been a career. My entire childhood was just spent with computers. For better or for worse, I think my education kind of came third or fourth in terms of the list of priorities, and kind of computers and 20-hour days just sat on the internet was, my teenage years. I really had no choice when education kind of ceased for me, for lack of a better phrase. It was either, I think, go and work in the supermarket and stack shelves, which in hindsight may have been the better decision, or go straight into what we now call, I guess, cybersecurity consulting. And so I spent 15 years doing that for global banks, insurers, governments. But ultimately, a very abrupt and violent entrance into the industry, I'd say.
Yeah, love it. So British, moved to Singapore. When did you move to Singers, and what was that all about? Yeah,
so I moved to Singapore 10 years ago at this point, so 2014. When I was with MWR at the time, they took investment, decided, okay, let's not just be a UK, European consultancy, but let's kind of go global. So Singapore, Dubai, and New York were the kind of focuses. I'd always wanted to kind of go work abroad and see what happened. So I kind of just threw my hat in to the mix and see what happened. 3 weeks later, I was in Singapore with 3 suitcases and haven't looked back since. As I kind of always say, when you wake up in London every day and it's grey and it rains, and then you wake up somewhere new and it's sunny and it's warm, it's very, very hard to beat that. And so, stuck there for 10 years now. Yeah,
I love it. And when did you, so you was with MWR, the acquisition of F-Secure, when did you start Watchtower? When did the inspiration, how did it all come about?
Yeah, so I think my role at kind of MWR, especially for the APAC side, was to really run our kind of high-end red team. So helping like regional, global banks, insurers, utilities, etc., understand if ransomware gangs came after you, if the North Koreans came after you for 6 months, how are they going to break in? How are they going to steal data? How are they going to steal money? And effectively simulate that out. So stress, prevention controls, detection controls, and then of course response capabilities. Mm-hmm. What we began to see was that while these exercises were crazy effective, they showed massive gaps and huge spaces for organizations to build into and build capability out very, very quickly. The aggression, the velocity, the persistence of attackers has just monumentally increased in the last 5 years. Mm. Whether we attribute that to ransomware or increased visibility, regardless, it has changed. And so I began thinking about ways where, consultancy doesn't scale. It has, It has inherent limitations in terms of how you can really deploy things out. Mm-hmm. But if you could use technology to give organizations that capability, that kind of simulation every single day, what would that look like? Because then you have scale, then you have the ability to react to how quickly things change. You can really help organizations continuously. Mm-hmm. So 2021, I decided, COVID bored us all to death. I was stuck in my hamster cage of an apartment. And I thought, time to try something new. And I thought, the worst that happens is I end up on the street with my dog. There are worse things that could happen to me at this point. So fine. And just thought, let's give it a go. And it's been, almost 3 years at this point. It's been a great journey. Awesome fun.
Yeah, I love it. But what I found really interesting about you, typically I speak to like co-founders, maybe even sometimes 3, sometimes 4 even. Yeah. You decided to do it on your own.
Correct.
Why?
I ask myself that question every single day. I love what we do. Absolutely love what we do. And I have a very, very clear view on what I want to achieve in this space, rightly or wrongly. I have a very, very clear kind of vision of what I think we want to set out to do with organizations. My view is that it's not to fit into a product category, but to really tell organizations today, how would you get compromised? And so from my perspective, it was just, let's just get things on the ground, let's just get moving and then just build from there. But I'm very, very lucky that I've been supported by an incredible team through the business. I think being a founder alone is an interesting decision for anyone, but I think you have to be supported regardless by an amazing team. And I think we've been very lucky.
Yeah, the founding team and stuff is so important. So exactly. Yeah, I can agree. So tell us a bit more about Watchtower and what you guys are up to then.
Sure. So like I kind of said, we've built our technology to really replicate what we used to do in that kind of high-end red teaming consultancy world. So basically using any or all means to gain access to an organization. Effectively, we've then taken that approach, that ethos, and turned it into technology. So our technology tells our clients every single day across enormous attack surfaces, think hundreds of thousands, if not millions of assets on the internet, how would we gain access to this organization, whether it be credentials into a VPN, exposures via a SaaS platform, third parties, or just exploiting infrastructure to gain access very, very quickly. Our technology has really, really morphed to the point where we have a very, very clear view on how we gain access to a lot of organizations, which means we've become quite well known for our ability to then improve that. A lot of our research, what we publish through Watchtower Labs, is stuff that we have in our technology already, but we decide to share with the internet, if I can paraphrase. Obviously, we fit into that external attack surface management, continuous automated red teaming kind of category. It's a great category for us to kind of sit in, if that makes sense. And I think from what we understand, lead it and really push the boundaries of that. But for me, the mission is much stronger. It's how do we help organizations understand today, how would they get breached?
Yeah. How easy is it to deploy?
Super easy. That's the beauty of it. I always say to clients, right? If the North Koreans were going to target you today, it's highly unlikely they would call you and say, we're going to hack you. We've got this agent. Can you deploy it? Or perhaps our appliance, you can change some firewall rules. It's just not reality, right? So we built our tech exactly the same way. We sit fully externally. There's no agents, no appliances. So typically we can be live with a client within 2 hours.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and so that's when it becomes scary, because then you've got that 2 hour, nothing to do on their side. 12 hours later, we typically have mapped out ways in. And that's interesting, but of course it shows that we can demonstrate very quickly real value. How do we actually help them materially improve posture?
Yeah. I saw you put a post up on LinkedIn, and from memory, it was attack surface management should be proactive. Is that right?
Correct.
What did you mean by that?
So my basic view is that a lot of the space, that whether we call it attack surface management, exposure management, vulnerability assessment, and they all kind of converge in different places, right, is very, very, very reactive. We see this new vulnerability, let's build detection, let's check our clients if they're affected. And to me, that's basically playing a racing game, because attackers are doing the exact same thing. They are waiting for that information. The North Koreans are not sat there going, give them 2 weeks to patch, see what happens. No, they are figuring out, they're analyzing, they're using it as quickly as possible. And so a reactive approach like that is basically doomed to failure in some cases. When we have such intricate knowledge of what our clients expose to the internet, and we have such an amazing piece of technology internally that allows us to analyze different pieces of software, different infrastructure architectures at scale, it means we can be extremely proactive, not just in terms of highlighting where things look materially scary, for lack of a better phrase, but it means that we can then be very proactive in terms of looking at software they use with our research team, as a simple example. And so a big part of what we do is a lot of end-day and also zero-day vulnerability research. So we can say to our client base, we see vendor A, product Y, across a huge swath of our client base. Therefore, that's where we're going to focus the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so we can proactively say to them, okay, this looks very scary right now. These are the controls we can put in while we talk to the vendor. But that proactiveness becomes really, really important if we are dealing with clients that do genuinely see that top tier threat as a serious concern.
Yeah. When you, so you mentioned the security labs. What was is it Watchtower?
Watchtower Labs, yeah.
Watchtower Labs. What actually is involved in that? And talk to me a bit more about that. Is that how you keep up to date with upcoming threats, the landscape, the evolution of it all?
Exactly. So from my perspective, again, we have built Watchtower as a technology piece, of course, but to really reflect what an APT group would do when targeting organizations. We work with BFSI, Fortune 500, so it is that top tier threat that they are concerned about. It's not 13-year-olds in their bedroom with a copy of SQL Map, right? And so we have to assume that those teams are doing their own vulnerability research, as we have seen over the last 2 years, whether it be Lockbit with Progress Move It technology, all the way through to Avanti earlier this year with different APT groups exploiting those systems. And so I feel it's our responsibility, if we're going to help that type of organization, that position, that kind of threat level of an organization, we have to do a significant amount of vulnerability research and to help them actually understand what's coming next. And that can then really inform strong posture improvement, strong posture reinforcement, for lack of a better phrase.
You're talking about posture. How, in terms of some of the security findings that you have found, have you been like slightly alarmed with how easy it might have been to sort of find a 0-day or a vulnerability?
I think when we do private research, right, on vendor software, I think we are continually disappointed by the state of systems, right? And I think I've been very, very public about this, that my view is that the industry is right now really at a race to the bottom in terms of what we can call a security appliance. Is a very simple example, right? But again, that's where I kind of see our space. As an industry, we've talked about shift left, SDLC, policy, governance, procedures, etc. for the last 10, 15 years. And these are all good things. But today, we cannot point at a huge success from those solutions or from those processes when we have got trivial vulnerabilities in security software, security appliances still on the internet. And so there's a major gap. And so I see ourselves saying, okay, this stuff is great. We'll continue to evolve it. We'll continue to help organizations day in, day out. On the SDLC side is a simple example. But in the meantime, we can't ignore the threat that sits there right now. And when we look at the last 6 to 8 months, there's been a massive trend. APT groups, ransomware gangs have just targeted appliances. No EDR, no monitoring, haven't been patched for 15 years. It's a very, very clear cycle.
Yeah. What is the rules of engagement when you do find something? Is it like 120 days, like disclosure? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have an industry-aligned VDP, 90 days. And that's kind of aligned to, I think, not necessarily any kind of rule set by the industry, but just kind of what's been accepted as best practice.
Okay.
My basic view, though, and as we kind of state in our VDP, is that we reserve the right to completely ignore that when we feel it's in the best interest of our clients. Simple example. And so if we look back early this year, Avanti, when interesting things were happening with, I think, patching of vulnerabilities, exploitation of weaknesses, at that point, 90 days is actually irresponsible. It makes no sense to keep that information secret when people are being actively targeted. And so it's an ethical, moral dilemma. There are both sides to the conversation. Okay. But the reality is, if our clients are secure, we've done our job.
Yeah, nice. What about the partnership with Echo? What's that? Can you tell us more about it?
Absolutely. So we work with lots and lots of different types of MSSP as a simple example. It's my strong view that in the last 7-8 years in the industry, if we think about kind of predict, prevent, detect, and respond as the 4 pillars of cybersecurity capability, right? About 8 years ago, we said detection and response is incredibly important. And it is. Being able to detect when someone breaks into your environment and then respond to that appropriately, super important. But as an industry, we have this amazing ability to hear this thing, it's important, and only do that thing. And so we've had organizations for the last kind of 8 years that have just gone, screw everything else. I'm just going to detect and I'm going to respond. That to me is quite scary, because if you're not preventing, actually detection becomes harder, response becomes harder, actually making your life more difficult. So by working with Echo and other MSSPs, what we see is a very, very strong ability to collaborate with them. Help them focus on what they do really well, detection and response, add our ability to fill that prevent pillar for their clients as well. So that when these vulnerabilities appear or these misconfigurations appear in their attack surface, we can flag them. Echo can work with their clients, get them fixed. They can reduce how much detection response they have to do and ultimately actually improve holistically the posture of that client. It's that joining of capabilities that becomes really, really powerful.
Nice. Have you got global clients? Is it just Singapore-based, Asia, global?
Fair. So absolutely global. I always tell people the absolute beauty of being sat in Singapore is that you're on a small island, roughly 20 miles across, right? People can't avoid you. That's not joking apart. But you have the security teams for every single large global MNC sat there. And so very quickly, we went in some very, very large organizations we now serve globally. That's been the real privilege of working inside Singapore. 6 months ago, we started out our UK team. So that's really going and pushing into Europe right now. And our US business will really kick off in January next year. So we are expanding quite quickly, but very, very pleased and very, very, oh my gosh, very honored to be trusted by our clients to continue to grow.
You talked about the US being a focus for next year. What's the future for Watchtower? What you guys got planned?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, the technology is really exciting. I think we are very, very proud of the fact that when we work with an organization, we can see a vulnerability identified, we can see them fix it, we can validate that. That is a material improvement in their posture. There's no theory there at all. We have found a vulnerability that could be exploited, we validated it, and they've removed it. So no one else can. No attacker can use that now. So what we now want to do is basically help ensure that everyone has access to this technology as far as possible. And so we're really pushing the commercial business now. So like I said, Europe has been fantastic to us so far. US to me is now the next kind of stage of Watchtower's growth. It's deploy boots on the ground in the US market, build and work out with partners what we want to do, but ultimately have a very, very clear structure where we can say, okay, actually we can help anyone globally now, we can engage globally, and still remain our 24/7 support that we have today.
What can we do as an industry to sort of better improve the posture, if that's the word to use? What can we do?
I think we have to help people understand context. And I think it's really, really important that people understand that a vulnerability remediation SLA, as a simple example, is guidance and doesn't have the context of exploitation in the wild going on. I think at the same time, we have to really help organizations understand that there are medium-term, long-term strategies for improving posture over time, but that does not remove today's concern. And so when we look at in the wild exploitation becoming a massive problem for emerging vulnerabilities, where historically people have said, well, I'll fix a critical vulnerability in 7 days, a high in 3 weeks, etc. These numbers, and even the NCSC is saying this now, have to go out the window. If something's being exploited in the wild or is likely to be, you've got hours. And so speed, prioritization, rapid reaction becomes incredibly important to actually just preventing that breach in the first place. And I think as an industry, if I was sat here saying, we've seen this 3 times in the last 2 years, I think people would say, Ben's exaggerating a little bit. But it has been almost weekly at this point where we see news 0 day. We eventually find out which APT group was using it because someone will eventually tell us. But in the meantime, it's a race. It's to work out, okay, where are organizations affected? What do they need to do? And really ensuring they patch as quickly as possible. And I think that concern, that velocity of what we need to do is still missed on some organizations today.
You spoke about speed. How has or is AI accelerating, like, one, the attacks, but then also the other side of it, the potential of being able to remediate and do the patches a bit quicker? Yeah,
it's a really, really interesting space. I think we're still figuring out where it's going to apply and where it's going to be used. But what's very, very clear, and I think we've known this for a while, right, is that computers and therefore AI, ML, are significantly better at analyzing massive amounts of data than humans will ever be. Not because we can't do it, but because AI, ML, computers can spot anomalies incredibly quickly, even if that anomaly is tiny. And so that's going to really fuel defense capabilities in the next, 18 months, 24 months. On the offensive side, I think there's a really, really interesting opportunity to really kind of speed up a lot of the work that we do. If I look at our vulnerability research teams right now, AI can give us a lot of very clear views to kind of cut through the boring work very quickly when we're analyzing vendor A's exciting new product, but also allows us, again, to apply that same logic. When we're looking at massive amounts of data across different organizations' attack surface, AI, ML can allow us to spot very, very small nuances across multiple clients that might actually correlate to then find further weaknesses. It becomes really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Ben, thoroughly enjoyed talking to you because you bring such a good energy to the pod. So thank you for that. I wish you all the best of success with Watchtower, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And the US sounds super exciting because if you can move as well, that would be even better.
Always a fun one.
See each other a bit more.
Cheers,
brother. Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Thank you very much. Appreciate having me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this very special BlackHat 2024 edition of CyberBytes, the podcast. If you did enjoy the show, please like, subscribe and share with your colleagues and friends. If you're a candidate looking for a new role or a hiring manager looking for their next technical or go-to-market hire, then please reach out directly or via our company email info@aspronsearch.com.